Okay, so I'm John Skeet. I'm a software engineer at Google in the London offices where we're filming this now. And to some extent that's kind of, well, I describe myself on Twitter as a Christian, husband, feminist, and software engineer.
In that order.
I think in that order. And I've written a book with a few editions, and obviously for reasons that we're here today, I participate an awful lot on Stackoverflow.
Great. So John, you are a software developer.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get started? How long have you been coding?
I've been coding since I was, I guess, 9 or 10. So when I was 8, we bought a ZX Spectrum 48K with the little rubber keys, and I played a lot on Jetpack and Horace Goes Skiing and Horace and the Spiders and Attic Attack and stuff. So I played games for a while, and then I started doing a little bit of programming, and the ZX Spectrum manual was like that thick. It was fantastic. This was for Spectrum Basic. And it explained everything right from scratch. And I don't know whether it was, my father was in software as well, sort of. He was an NHS information manager type who did sort of coding almost on the side, where he saw that there was something that needed doing, he would dabble in coding. So he didn't regard himself as a professional software engineer, but he did know coding. So some of my early days was on AVAX on VMS as well. But anyway, I assume that he encouraged me to go into coding a little bit, but it was very much a small push, and then you just learn things yourself. And I remember actually one day when my dad was ill, and I was at home, maybe it was the summer holidays, I can't remember, and I wrote a small game where literally an enemy spaceship of probably a few characters saying enemy or something would appear at a random place, and you would have a spaceship, and you would press up or down or whatever. There weren't cursor keys on the Spectrum, so it was like W and S or whatever to move up and down, and then you press space to fire, and then it would say, well done, you hit the alien, or you didn't hit the alien. It's like, Dad, look what I've done, it's amazing. So that's the first thing I particularly remember doing. Everyone did the 10, print hello, 20, go to 10 kind of thing, but that was the first thing I remember doing that had any use. It was a tiny, tiny game. I then remember, I'm not sure the ordering between writing the Adrian Mole game, so we have The Diary of Adrian Mole, age 13 3/4, I think it was a big book back in the 80s. And so I did an Adrian Mole game where you would collect acne cream and avoid, I can't remember what, so it was a little platform game, again on the Spectrum. And I also wrote Logo for the Spectrum. This was mad, and I would love to see the code now just to go, oh wow, that's horrible. So we had a Spectrum at home and a BBC Micro at school. And at school we had Logo, which was on the BBC Micro. And Logo, for anyone who hasn't seen it, is this thing where you have an imaginary turtle, and I'm sure that there are physical turtles you can get that interact with Logo, but I don't think I've ever used one. So you have a triangle on the screen representing this little robot, and you can say forward 20, and it sort of draws a straight line. And then you say turn right 90, and it turns right and then forward. And then you can put programming into it, so you can say, right, do this 4 times, go forward 20, turn right 90, and then repeat. And so it draws a square. It's like, that's amazing stuff. Oh, I haven't got it on the Spectrum. Tell you what, I'll implement it myself. I'm 10 or 11. No one has told me, you don't do that. Programming languages are hard, parsing's hard, you're never going to manage this. So I did, and it was no doubt awful, but it worked. You could have loops, you could save and load your programs. I have no idea what you could do about editing your program when it was there, or whether it was all just within one big thing. But looking back, I feel proud of it, even though I can't remember the details of it, because that was the first project that was far bigger than I should have taken on. And from there I went on to PCs and C and a bit of Pascal, not very much, and then Java in university, and then C# fairly soon after university, and the rest is mostly alternating between Java and C#, but really just loving C#. So I think since I was 9 or 10, I've wanted to be a software engineer. It's just been, okay, this is awesome. You don't need to be physically fit. You don't need to be attractive. You can just do it. And you can be as creative as you like. You can do algorithmic stuff if you like. You can do graphics. I spent a load of time as a kid with graph paper, and I had Sinclair User was my magazine of choice every month, and it would print screenshots, and I would copy these screenshots because back then graphics were so primitive that you could see every pixel. So I would copy those onto graph paper, and yeah, this was not creative at all, but it was kind of interesting enough and fun. So I've always been very computer focused, and it's a job like none other.
Awesome. So in the last 20 years, software has eaten the world.
Mm-hmm.
Society is becoming increasingly dependent on code. And so we're seeing this new generation of developers enter the field. What keeps all of this still exciting for you? And
for me, nothing's making it less exciting. So the same kind of things that are exciting to me now were exciting before. I know some people who say, oh, I know how to do loops now. I know how to do the implementation stuff. That's boring to me. I want to do big architecture things. Like, no, I just still enjoy just getting code done that solves a problem, and there are different ways of doing that, and I enjoy seeing how different ways work or don't work. But ultimately, just sit me in front of a text editor and give me something useful to do, and it will take me a few hours to do something, and I just love those hours of the actual coding. Is just still loads of fun. However it's evolved. So it's certainly changed in terms of what you can do with how little code. So the other day, as part of my job, I was investigating the Google Cloud Platform Vision API. So this is something where you give it a picture and it can identify things. And I had no reason to expect this to fail. I have great trust in my colleagues, but still, when you write a little bit of code that loads a file from disk and sends it up and says, please show me the faces and the landmarks, and it comes back saying, there are faces here, 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 and the Sydney Opera House in the background. It's like, yes, that's exactly right. And I sort of measured it out with paint.net, and it's like, yep, that face is right, that face is right, that face is right. Yes, and that took relatively little code. And my job is now to make it take even less code and to be as simple as possible to use. But even so, it took so little time to do something that 20 years ago, as you say, would have been just completely impossible. No one did that, or at least they certainly didn't do it outside massive mainframes or whatever. You wouldn't be able to just do it as anyone. Whereas there's nothing that I did the other day that someone else couldn't have done who has nothing to do with Google, and has a free version of Visual Studio and a free Google Cloud account or whatever, and you can just do it. It's phenomenal.
Would you say developers can take credit for developing the future?
I don't think they should take credit for developing the future on their own. That would be enormously dangerous. So there's a real risk that developers end up in a bubble, and we've all seen. So I would say Git is a great example of a fantastic tool that was clearly written by developers. Now imagine if telephones were only designed by developers without any other product management or anything getting involved. And so you needed to know the details of bits of implementation, and if you asked how to use something, they would explain it in a way that made you feel stupid. People have explained Git to me several times. I'm now just about familiar with it, but it takes about 2 minutes to make me feel really stupid. Imagine if that were everything you ever touch. That would be disastrous. But developers have an immensely important role to play in developing the future. So we need to work with other people who have great ideas of where society wants to go, who may have no coding skills, but have brilliant vision, or may have other passions in terms of how do we include people who are underrepresented in software in the business of building software, so that we cater to their needs as well as ours. I can scratch my own itch fairly easily, but if I'm going to help other people, I need to get them involved, otherwise it's just patronizing.
Let's spend some time talking about your Stack Overflow story.
Okay.
Let's go all the way back to the beginning. Tell us about when you joined Stack Overflow and what it's been like for you ever since.
Okay, so we can definitely pinpoint. I don't have my Stack Overflow profile up right now to tell you the exact date, but I think it was something like the 24th of September 2008. It was after Stack Overflow had gone out of beta, so I don't have the beta badge. To my eternal shame, I don't have the beta badge. If you could just retroactively fix that, that would be lovely. But I think I was reading a review of my book, because I'm sufficiently egotistical that I look for reviews of my book, and Sarah Chips had one. She's now doing Juliebots and awesome other stuff, but at the time she had reviewed my book, and I'm not sure whether it was that she referred to Stack Overflow within that post or in the next post in her blog, but basically it's all her fault. So I went on Stack Overflow. I did a quick look for, at the time I was, my mind was in find things about the book. So I searched for C# in depth and found a few people asking questions about some of the examples and thought, okay, I can, strangely enough, I'm in a good position to answer that. Answered those. And then looked and thought, oh, yeah, I can answer that as well. And this was kind of familiar to me because before Stack Overflow, I spent huge amounts of time on newsgroups. So Usenet newsgroups or net news or whatever you want to call it. So all just plain text and mostly posting on, during university, it was the Alt Book Stephen King group, and after university as well. But then there was Complang Java Programmer and whatever the C# group was called, I can't remember. But I spent a lot of time posting on there. So I already had some communication skills for here's how you explain some concepts. I was already into the whole, looking for questions that I'd be able to provide a useful answer to. I think Jeff Atwood's described Stack Overflow as meant to be a John Skeet honeypot kind of thing. So take someone who already enjoys doing that and gives them markdown with an editor and the reward system, however trivial and completely meaningless reputation is, yes, it's still a buzz. I'm still looking forward to getting to 1 million points. I'm not going to deny that. It would be pointless. No pun intended. So anyway, so that day I joined Stack Overflow. I started posting answers. The next day, which I think was a Friday, I wrote a blog post on the train on the way home saying, I think this is going to be my next addiction. I tend to get into things. I will listen to an album repetitively until I know it off by heart. I played Settlers of Catan, nothing but Settlers for ages and ages. So I felt this is going to be my next addiction. And sure enough, it was. And that was after, it was 24 hours or maybe 28 hours afterwards. And in fact, funny thing about the rep cap that was in place back then, I had a friend around that weekend who was already on Stack Overflow. And he was saying, you can only get 200 rep per day. I said, no, I'm sure you can't. Look, I got 215 yesterday. Like, okay, so I hit the rep cap on something like my second day. I think I must have been very lucky and hit a particular question. But it means that the rep cap has been an interesting friend and adversary since the very start. So joined in September. By December, I was high ranking, let's say. And then something weird happened over that Christmas holidays where the whole business about rep cap only applies to votes. That was actually a bug, or at least it was a bug in some people's eyes. And so they fixed it and had a hard rep cap of 200 and then realized that actually that was kind of annoying in various ways and fixed it again in January or something. And I think by then I got to number 1. I think it was around then. I think we were at the top was like 18,000 or something by then. So yeah, back in those heady days. And since then, well, it's just been kind of crazy. I wrote a blog post in early 2009, which is a long time ago now, about Stack Overflow and micro-celebrity and strange cultish behavior. So even back then, and presumably because I joined when, okay, it was post-beta, but it was small enough that one person could be seen as making a difference. People were already recognizing my posts and maybe saying, oh, darn, I've just answered, but I've seen that John Skeet answered, so what's the point? It's like, no, that's never a good thing. You always answer, doesn't matter, you've got something to contribute that I haven't, some perspective I haven't, some way of wording things that I haven't. Please don't feel intimidated by the fact that I'm answering as well. But yeah, there were already some jokes around me, and I don't know exactly when the Chuck Norris post came, but that was, yeah, this is kind of weird. Fun, don't get me wrong, fun but very odd. So Stack Overflow has been, right from the start, a major part of my life. I haven't looked recently at how many days I've now got uninterrupted in terms of visiting, but certainly when I'm on holiday, I check Stack Overflow, not as much. And these days, if you look at the number of posts I answer every day, that's massively decreased since sort of, my guess is about 2012 may have been the heyday, as it were. These days, I spend more of my time adding comments to questions saying, yeah, could you clarify the question a bit? It's not really a good fit at the moment. Please read this resource over here, or provide a short but complete program, that kind of thing. There are fewer questions to be answered that I think are ready to be answered for my particular skill set. And other, I'm sure, iOS developers or some other up and coming thing, there are more questions all the time. But yeah, my answering rate is declining, but not my interest.
Great. So for people who don't know what Stack Overflow is, how do you describe the site?
So you can do it sort of unemotionally as it's a question and answer site. People ask questions and other people answer them. And that's kind of missing almost everything about it. That's like saying, yeah, software engineering is something where you type keys and stuff happens. It's like, it's far, far richer than that, as any community is. So it's about bettering yourself, whether you're answering or asking. It's about solving people's needs. It's definitely about, and I think you'll find long-time Stack Overflow users will hark onto the creating a Wikipedia-like site, but of questions for software engineers. So solving software engineering problems. It's meant to be a repository of good questions and good answers to those questions. And that's typically the reason used for, yeah, I can see that you've got a problem and it needs fixing, but it's still not quite a good fit for Stack Overflow. But at the same time, it definitely is meeting people's needs right away. Back when I was on newsgroups, there used to be a matter of, you would post a question, and if someone hadn't answered in a day, it was reasonable to write a follow-up saying, surprised no one's answered this, here's a bit more information, ideally. People just saying, top post, or bump to get it back to being visible was annoying, but you would expect to take a day before you got an answer. Back in 2009, 2010, whenever the Stack Overflow Dev Days was, I remember very clearly Jeff Atwood saying, people are having to wait 20 minutes to get an answer, and that's just unacceptable. And I'm thinking, wow, we've gone from 24 hours down to 20 minutes, and that's not good enough. And the reality is that nowadays, if you ask a question and it hasn't been answered in, I don't know, we could have a look, but my guess is 5 minutes, 10 minutes at the tops, it will be off the front page, and you'll find people still answering it if they're in tags that are particularly useful to them. But generally, if you've asked a good question, in those 5 minutes, someone interesting or someone who is interested in that topic will have at least started answering it. And that's kind of mad. The idea that I could ask anything, if I've put the effort into doing it properly, ask an interesting question and get someone in the world interested in it in 5 minutes is just so empowering. As well as at the same time, you've got meeting my immediate need. By the time I've come back from a coffee, I will have something that will unblock me from my next bit of work. And at the same time, it's building up this mountain of answers so that I don't need to ask the questions nearly as often. And sometimes I will start thinking, I need to ask about something on Stack Overflow. So first I'll do my due diligence and search and see if there's an answer. Hey, that exact question has been asked. And maybe one time in 30, it'll turn out that I've written the answer to that question and completely forgotten about it myself. So it's a John Skeet backup apart from anything else, because I forget things all the time.
So I think Stack Overflow works because developers are kind of different professions. You know, you talk about getting an answer to a question within 5 minutes. I don't think that would work in other professions. So tell me a little bit about why you think developers are so willing to share what they know.
I think there's a mixture of things, some positive, some a little less so. So there's a certain amount of showing off. We like to think of the tech world as a meritocracy, and sometimes it really isn't. And I think it's kind of telling that the industry is so undiverse. For something that's a pure meritocracy, it really shouldn't matter your race, nationality, color of skin, gender, sexual orientation, etc. It should be a completely level playing field if it's a meritocracy, and that's not how it works, and that needs to change. But a certain amount of that is the showing off. You know, look how much I know. So that's one aspect that motivates sharing. Another is simple altruism. People do enjoy helping other people, and it's free to share things. So you know, you can enjoy giving gifts to people, but that does make you poorer. If you share knowledge, you don't lose anything. And software engineering is such a knowledge-based profession, but there are plenty of other ones as well. Above all, though, I think it's software engineers generally enjoy their work. This is one thing I've always found it slightly crazy, that software engineers are so well paid when we're being paid to do stuff we enjoy doing and that we do in our free time anyway. You know, I've seen plenty of software engineers who basically go home at the weekend and keep doing effectively their day job, even on their own product, because they enjoy it so much. I personally try to keep a bit more of a gap between the work stuff that I do and the home stuff that I do. But it's still, in both cases, writing C# code and pushing it to GitHub. It's just that sometimes it's Node time and sometimes it's Google stuff. But yeah, there aren't many professions where people go home from a long day at work and then do exactly the same thing. So when your hobby is also your work, then it's kind of natural that you would join in communities that enjoy doing that kind of thing. And with Stack Overflow having the sort of gamification side, which I'm sure there's a huge overlap between gamers and software engineers. It's, you know, fortunately, I think it's less of an overlap than we might expect, and that gaming is more diverse than games would lead you to believe, if you see what I mean, which again needs to change in terms of the games. But yeah, we're all familiar with Xbox achievements and the like, and we like them, however pointless it is. As I say, you know, when I hit 1 million rep, or I'm coming up to 500 gold badges, and that's a good thing. And you know, 500, completely arbitrary number. Maybe I should be celebrating 512 as a power of 2. But yeah, these are pointless things. No one is going to write on my gravestone, you know, here lies John Skeet, reputation, whatever. It doesn't mean that I'm smarter than anyone else. It certainly doesn't mean that. But it can still be something to be proud of, even if it's sort of irrational to some extent.
So I meet a lot of developers who just consume content on Stack Overflow. Sometimes they have imposter syndrome. They don't think they have anything to give back, or they might have tried posting and they were shot down. Negative experience. So what advice or encouragement could you give individuals who've never shared knowledge on Stack Overflow?
So I guess there are two aspects. One is people who want to ask questions on Stack Overflow, which is typically a more intimidating thing, which is sort of odd in a way. You would expect that admitting you don't know something should be less difficult than saying, hey, I know this. But typically, people do find that questions are received more harshly than answers. And perhaps it's because when you're confident in what you know, expressing that is easier. If you're going to ask a question, read the help center. For goodness sake, please. You know, we do put the information in front of everyone about what we're looking for in a question, and a lot of people ignore it. And that's on them, frankly. But this isn't some giant end-user license agreement. It's not some pointless legalese. This is what the site's for, and if you don't follow these guidelines, you're going to get shot down. And there are good reasons for that. We want to keep it this repository of good questions, but there is a lot of help available. So read it, take some time, don't hurry. That's the main thing. Yeah, you're probably on a deadline, it's coming to the end of the week, you want to ship something, but just rushing a question is not going to help. It will take far longer than spending the hour, 2 hours, 3 hours maybe, asking just the right question. And if you're lucky, by the time you're ready to ask the question, you don't need to anymore. At which point, maybe you should ask the question anyway and answer it yourself. Or sometimes you find that the question itself sort of dwindles away to nothing. My favorite way of doing this is finding a short but complete program that demonstrates the problem. So unless the problem is inherently about a user interface problem, don't have a GUI. Use console apps. It's by far the simplest way of demonstrating something is like, here's 10 lines of code, compile it, run it from a shell, and you will see the problem. And say, I expected it to do this, it does that. And anyone can just reproduce it, or maybe say, hey, that doesn't do that for me. Maybe we're on different versions and you just need to up your version. Great, problem solved. Otherwise, it's probably a problem of your understanding of something, and what should really be fixed is that understanding, and at that point you can make it do what you want. But by the time you've got a short but complete program that doesn't have any distractions, if you're doing a query and you're joining on one thing and aggregating on another, then don't have 10 other properties that are completely irrelevant. It doesn't need to be your exact code. We don't want company confidential code on Stack Overflow. I see so many people that I say, could you post a complete example? No, I can't post my whole project. It's corporate. I think, well, I didn't ask for your actual code. There would be far too much of that. I just want something that shows the exact problem, as small as you can make it. And while you're making it smaller, suddenly you go, I forgot to do that. Or, yeah, of course that doesn't work because I got a semicolon in the wrong place, or as soon as you look up the documentation, whatever it is. So that's mostly around the asking questions stuff. And if you go to tinyurl.com/stack-hints, I've got a whole blog post. It's quite long. It will take you half an hour to read just the advice. Read it anyway. It will save you half an hour of arguing with people about why, my question's fine, who says it's not good? Well, if you follow the advice, typically you won't get that, I promise. In terms of answering, be confident in what you know. Again, if someone has asked a question and said, this doesn't behave this way, how do I fix it? Then ideally, if you can give a short but complete program that says, here's a demonstration of it working, with this minor tweak, this is what you did wrong, some explanation, not just code. Here's some explanation, here's an example, and apart from anything else, by producing a short but complete program, you've proved to yourself that it really does work. Sometimes people will say, just do this, it'll be fine. Like, no, it really won't. Look, here's a complete program that shows that your answer doesn't work. And I've been guilty of this in the past as well, and still will be today, I'm sure. But where possible, I do like to provide a complete program. Think about what the person's actually trying to do. Sometimes don't just focus on their immediate problem. So many times people have said, right, why isn't this SQL query working? And we get an answer saying, you've done concatenation, select star from some table where ID equals plus ID. No, you need to put ID in quotes. No. You need to use parameterized SQL because that's the answer to the bigger problem of how do I do a query that involves some user-entered information? And just by adding the quotes around, you've got a SQL injection attack, and they were better off when it didn't work at all because at least that wasn't a security problem. That was just a not working problem. When something doesn't work at all, it can't usually reveal other people's sensitive information. If you've got a SQL injection attack, that's awful. So try to look at the bigger problem they're trying to solve. If the bigger problem they're trying to solve isn't clear from the question, then add a comment asking why. Admittedly, you need a bit of rep before you can ask a comment, add a comment to ask for more reasoning, but try to put yourself in the other person's shoes. One of my favorite sayings is, before you criticize someone, walk a mile in their shoes, because then you're a mile away from them and you've got their shoes. But the more empathy we can show, one of the things I love about Stack Overflow is it ups your game in completely different ways than you might expect. Yes, I have learnt tons of technical stuff by answering questions on Stack Overflow, but I've also upped my game in terms of communication and empathy. And those are two things that we are sorely missing in software often. And this goes back, sorry, I'm a broken record on diversity. The more we can be empathetic with people, the more we will include other people. Because if I can put myself in your shoes, then I won't say, get back to whatever it is. And I won't just make casual comments that are so hurtful. Instead, I'll try to raise you up instead of putting you down. So the more you can empathize, that will be a great skill to have, not just on Stack Overflow, also within your job, and also, heck, within life and society in general. If we could raise everyone's skill level for empathy in general, then a lot of problems in the world would be solved.
Oh man, John, you're gonna make me cry. This is why you're number one. This is why you're number one. Let's talk about that a little bit. So we struggle all the time internally to talk about diversity, inclusion, and how we can make Stack Overflow a more welcoming place.
Right.
So this video, we're going to show this at our annual company meetup.
Mm-hmm.
So what advice would you have for us as a company, Stack Overflow? How can we be more awesome?
Right. So I don't have many answers on this. I was recently engaged with a conference organizer and a speaker about saying, do you know what, this conference, it's an awesome conference, but it would be so more awesome if we just had a bunch more diversity, because the conversations end up being better, the outlook is better, the questions get better, everything gets better with more diversity of opinion. It's hard to overstate how much this can help everything. This isn't a matter of political correctness, and it's not even just a matter of thinking of other people, it's thinking about ourselves. I will have a better time if our industry becomes more diverse, if Stack Overflow becomes more diverse. I will get to hear more interesting things and more awesome blog posts, and all kinds of things. Why would we want to exclude, whether it's women, so half the world, whether it's people from other countries, all kinds of things just get better with diversity. And that's glib to say and much easier than giving a solution. But I would say that Stack Overflow, and I think the same thing at conferences and generally public things, need to be over-representative. So it would be wrong to make the target of Stack Overflow our, I don't know what metrics you use. Maybe it's in terms of visible thought leaders per tag, people who have an average score per answer in a tag of 5 or more. People that will be seen as, this person knows what they're doing. We shouldn't settle for being the same representation as the industry, because we know the industry is screwed up. No other way of putting it, we've messed up. It's not where it should be. And if we set the bar at, I don't know what the actual number is, but suppose it's 10% women, and I will focus for the minute on women and men, and obviously those who don't identify in binary ways, but obviously it's a bigger conversation about race, sexuality, all kinds of things. But it's just easiest to use women and men as an example. So suppose the industry is 10% women. Suppose Stack Overflow is 10% women are prominent. Does that mean it's good? Well, it's representative, but it's representative of something we don't like. We've got to overachieve, make it 20%, and that will help to raise things up and raise the game, and maybe then the industry can get to 20%, at which point we need to raise our game to 40%, and then things can actually shift until we get an industry that is representative of where we want to be. And a lot of this, I think, and I'm speaking from position of straight white male, wealthy, healthy privilege, which is always a risky, patronizing place to speak from. I think a lot of this is showing everyone that they have not even necessarily role models, but people that have made it, people that are there, that it's not impossible, and that they shouldn't feel. Everyone should understand that if they are feeling harassed, put down, discriminated against, however that's happening, that's not their fault. That's the industry being awful and individuals being awful, and call them out on it. And public plea, if you see me being sexist on Stack Overflow, for goodness sake, call me out on it. I will be mortified, but grateful for being called out on it. And that's the attitude that we should have across the industry, because it's the only way we're going to change things. And it's also not, we tend to put the problem onto the people who are being affected by it and say, well, nothing's stopping women from asking questions on Stack Overflow. It's like, well, no, other than giving patronizing responses, or generally the rest of the industry being biased already. It's our problem to fix. So if you're a guy watching this and you have an awesome female colleague who is saying, I'm thinking of posting this on Stack Overflow, but I'm not sure because it's kind of hostile, just say, yeah, please do. Tell you what, let's look over it first and maybe give some proofreading, and if you've got more experience on Stack Overflow, help them to have an awesome experience. I know some people have a hard time on Stack Overflow because it is all in English, and that was a deliberate choice for good reasons. We have the Portuguese site, we have various things, but the main Stack Overflow site is English. There are plenty of people who English isn't their primary language. I don't speak any other languages to near the extent that I would need to in order to participate in anything. I am so lucky that I speak English as a primary language, however much it may not seem like that sometimes. But a lot of people who don't have English as a primary language know someone who does, or know someone whose English is at least better than theirs. So go and ask them first, and let's help to build each other up. If you know someone who is going to have a hard time, maybe it's not even primary language, maybe they're dyslexic, and spelling matters. All of these things end up, just like we know that body language is some huge proportion of communication, so spelling and capitalization and just organizing your post well makes a huge difference as to the reception that it'll get. So if you see someone who's struggling, just help them, and let's try to build it up for everyone. That's not something that Stack Overflow as a company can do. That's a message that they can put to the rest of the world saying, we want you to help each other. Actually, maybe that is something Stack Overflow can do. Maybe it can have I'm a new user, but I have a friend who's another user. Could I start drafting a post and let the other person share and collaborate on it? And maybe buddy up to avoid. And maybe there could even be a pool of people waiting to buddy up. I don't know. These are just random, completely off the top of my head thoughts. But it's got to be collaborative. And I think we want to get to a place where the people who feel got at are the people who are willing to abuse other people. So it's got to be zero tolerance for the snarky comments, and that if someone looks, they will find snarky comments from me, I'm certain. Usually, I would hope, after someone has said, I haven't got time to read the documentation, it's like, then, sorry, you shouldn't expect anyone else to put in time helping you if you can't be bothered to help yourself. You should always do your research first. So if someone is showing the wrong attitude to start with, then a certain amount of snark I think is okay. If they've just dumped their homework, if you can see that they've copied and pasted their homework straight into Stack Overflow, that's kind of disrespectful. So a certain amount of disrespect back I can at least understand. Maybe the world would be better if everyone treated them with respect but said no, thank you, but no thank you. I can't see that happening, but we can stop the just arbitrary discrimination. I have a skewed perspective here because I've been incredibly lucky in my career. I'm not ambitious, and I've kind of fallen from job to job and not looked. So I'm very lucky. I don't know what the world is like out there for a junior developer who's struggling and really, in a job they don't like or whatever. That's just not a situation I've been in. So apologies if any of this seems patronizing or just shallow. I would emphasize having fun. So if you're having fun in what you're doing, chances are you will want to go home and do some more research and start coding stuff up for fun. So as an example of me leveling up myself to some extent, I've hardly done any universal Windows app development. The one thing I have developed is I have a Raspberry Pi at home that's running the Windows 10 IoT edition, and I work from a shed. At home, my wife has a little office that was part of an extension we had done, but there's no room for a second office. But at the back of the garden, we now have a beautiful new shed built sort of last November, which is half shed with lawnmower and things and half home office. And so I have my little Raspberry Pi there, and that's always listening to me. So I can say, shed lights on, and the lights come on, and shed music play, and the music starts playing and things. And that was just because I enjoy what I'm doing, and I had a reason to do it at home, and I loved the language I was programming in, and I knew I'd enjoy learning about universal Windows apps. It made it fun to do, and so I, in whatever tiny way, leveled up there. So if you can try to align your job with fun, that's awesome. It doesn't need to be perfectly fun in that for 7 years of being at Google, I was mostly programming in Java, and Java is not my preferred language. It's my second language, but C# is by far my favorite language, but that was fine. I would rather code in Java at Google than in C# anywhere else. And now I get to write C# at Google, which is awesome. I'm trying to say, don't necessarily limit your career to just things that you enjoy doing already perfectly. If you're a web developer and someone gives you a back-end role and says, would you like to take this on? At least consider it. And the reverse. So I am a back-end engineer. I have tried doing web stuff. I'm really not very good at it, but if the needs must, then I would have a look and see whether I could master the however many languages you need to understand these days to do. I'm in awe of web developers because at the moment at least, I really couldn't do it. So do stuff you enjoy. If you do have enough time to do stuff in your home time, as it were, in your playtime, then write blogs. It doesn't matter whether or not anyone reads your blog, because you will gain just from writing it. There's nothing that sorts out to what extent you know something as well as writing about it. So maybe that's writing a blog post, maybe keep a little notebook of stuff you've done for fun. Obviously answer Stack Overflow questions, because even if that's things that you've only done for fun, it can still be helping someone else massively. And again, it will help you in your communication skills. I can't emphasize enough how much communication is important. When you think of the stereotypical software engineer, you imagine a nerd who cannot talk. So it would be a nerd who lives in their parents' basement who has never had a girlfriend, right? That is the stereotype. I don't think that stereotype is right, but it's not as far off as it might be. And when you think that our job is all about communication, and we've got a tough job in communication because we are, with one piece of text, trying to communicate at two very different levels. We're trying to write something that a compiler can understand and that also a human can understand later on, whether that's us in 6 months' time coming back to maintain the code or someone else entirely. And that's a tough job. So you wouldn't give that job to someone who can't communicate. So why are we all so poor at communicating? So one way of improving your communication skills, both in terms of code and in terms of prose, is Stack Overflow, blog posts, go to user conferences, user groups or conferences, and speak at user groups or conferences if you can. Some people really don't want to speak, and I can completely understand that. It's not something that's troubled me for whatever reason. We were discussing this earlier on. I'm an introvert. I find it very difficult to go around a conference and talk to individuals but put me on a stage and I'll happily talk to 1,000 people. That's not a problem at all. I'm weird, I don't know. But go to user groups and just engage with other subject matter, find out what other people are doing, and if something grabs your interest, latch onto that. Doesn't matter whether or not it's immediately relevant to your day job. If it is, then great, and maybe you can latch onto it in the company time. That's always a good thing. Otherwise, do some stuff in your free time at home. Get together with other people who are interested, because that you really end up with a virtuous cycle of helping to cross-pollinate ideas and enthusiasm, which is, it's awful. If you're completely on your own, then it's very easy to get downhearted. If you've got someone else who can say, hey, that's awesome, that thing that you did is really great, then A, that helps you with enthusiasm. B, if something goes wrong and you get blocked, then maybe they'd be willing to help. And at the same time, you're probably enthusing them to do something else they can show you, and you can go, hey, that's awesome, and you're building each other up. All of this is really about being a human. And that's the part that I think when we focus on tech is a meritocracy and pretending that tech is race and gender blind, you can't tell the gender of this person just from their username, therefore tech has no view of gender. All of this stuff that ignores the fact that people are human, I don't think helps anyone. So remember that you're a human. Enjoy learning stuff as best you can. Don't be intimidated by, if you ever feel intimidated on Stack Overflow because I've posted something, then remember that I'm just a dude who fails stuff all the time. My code has bugs, I hopefully fix most of them. I write tests. I try to write tests sometimes, not everything's tested. Think that about whoever you're looking up to. They're just a human as well. If you think they're an expert, that probably means they know something more than you do, but you're probably not in a good place to judge how much more than they know, if that makes sense. It's very easy to be called an expert. You just need to know a little bit more than most people. And it's quite easy to do that in one specific thing. And then no one knows that you have no idea what's beyond that either. So don't start revering people too much or assuming you can't question them. If you see a Stack Overflow post by me or someone else with high rep that you think has a bug, say so, because aside from anything else, then I will learn, the post will be fixed, and other people won't have that problem. And you might feel awesome about yourself. By all means, feel great about correcting me, that's fine. But always remember the human side. Look after your human side. Don't work yourself into the ground. If you find your job is asking you to work whatever you think is unreasonable. Me, I don't want to work for more than 40 hours a week. If you think 50 hours is reasonable, then okay, but hold yourself back a bit, give yourself some time off. Don't work too hard. I get in trouble with parents of people going to university when they're saying, make sure you do lots of work, and my advice is just make sure you enjoy yourself and don't work too hard. That doesn't tend to go down terribly well, but I think it happens for software careers as well. Certainly, I know in gaming, it's just you're expected to kind of work yourself into the ground, and I don't think that's healthy for the industry or for the individuals or anything like that. So look after yourself as a person. Actively try to get into a job you'll enjoy and can learn from, and you'll grow.
Amazing. All right, it's a wrap.
Done.